Hi, I'm Marlo from Wild Food UK and welcome to episode 1 of a new series that I'm going to be bringing out over the next 6 months or so called Foraging for Beginners. Today's episode is going to be about things that you can find in your garden. I'm going to do an episode on riversides, an episode on hedgerows, an episode on meadows, an episode on trees and an episode on mushrooms. But before I get into the plants that you might be able to find in your garden right now, I'm going to go through some of the basics for foraging and mainly the kit and the books that you should surround yourself with. So come on over here, Attila, let's have a look at what I use as my foraging kit. I'm going to give you a bit of advice, guys. I did get given this big knife here as a gift for Christmas a few years ago, but this is an illegal knife to carry around with you. It's a mushroom knife with a lovely brush on the end and a locking mechanism there. Now, any knife with a locking mechanism is illegal to carry in public unless you have very good reason, and the blade here is more than 2 inches, which makes it an illegal blade. So my foraging knife is this little keyring Leatherman. We used to sell these, but unfortunately they don't make them anymore. This knife is perfectly legal to carry around with you, and that tiny little blade there is all I ever need when I'm going out foraging. These scissors come in handy as well. So be careful, don't take out big giant knives like this. Not giant, but still, even so, it is an illegal knife. You don't need a knife this big for foraging. We're not hunting. The second thing that you need in your foraging kit is something just to take whatever you've foraged for home, and you can start really simply. A bag for life, like this one here, is kind of what I started with. I used to take out even carrier bags. They're handy because they fit in your pocket, and until you've actually found something to forage for, they don't take up any space, or you don't have to carry them around in your hand. So bags are quite useful. What I use most often though, nowadays, is one of these. This is our own design forager's belt bag. They clip onto your belt, they leave your hands free, and when you're ready to forage, you just unwrap the bag. And ours come with 2 designs. Whoops, a nice mushroom, or a nice beech leaf. There you go. Foragers traditionally though use baskets, and there's 3 different types of baskets that you can use really. We've got a small basket here which is good for just bringing home some herbs and a small amount of things that you've foraged for. Obviously a bigger basket is going to allow you to bring home more stuff, but then on our sales website, foraging.co.uk, what I think the best ones are these creels, which go over the shoulder. I've never been a model, but there you go. And you've got a basket on your hip with your hands free, ready for you to go foraging. That is all you need with regards to kit for actually foraging. You just need something to help you cut the different mushrooms and plants that you're going foraging for. Leave that there like that. And you need something to bring your foraged fare home in. That's your kit. The second thing when you're beginning at foraging to surround yourself with are good foraging books. So I'm going to run through some of my favourites on the table here. First of all, we've got the Forager's Calendar here by John Wright. John Wright's someone who I know quite well. We're going to be running courses with him later this year, and this is one of the best general books on foraging. Goes through month by month what you can go foraging for. which is a good way to lay it out. I had to mention this one because it was written by one of our instructors, David Hamilton, Where the Wild Things Grow, a forager's guide to the landscape. It's a good book with plenty of good information. No photography though, which is why I hate to blow our own trumpet, but we've been teaching people about foraging for 14 years now. We really do know what we're doing, and our book, the Foraging Pocket Guide, available on Amazon or our website, is currently the top rated foraging guide in the UK. After 1,000 reviews on Amazon, it's the only 5-star rated foraging book. And in our book, we've included photos of everything that we describe with key identifying features all the way through. Very, very good book, even if I do say so myself. We also do like the Collins series of books on plants, and this one on trees and on mushrooms. They tend to be the more comprehensive of the books that you find. With regards to mushrooms, again, last year we brought out our own mushroom foraging guide, which is, without 1,000 ratings, still 5-star on Amazon, and has over 120 different species of mushrooms and their poisonous lookalikes, very importantly. And it was recently reviewed by the British Mycological Society as one of the best beginner books for learning about mushrooms. So we're very proud of that as well. A book that I used to consider my mushroom Bible is Mushrooms by Roger Phillips. This book has a lot more mushrooms in it than our one. Our one's focused on foraging. This one has a few hundred more mushrooms in it than ours. But for a beginner, I've heard people say that this book is slightly overwhelming. And then when you get to my level, you kind of look at books that go even further than that. And here we have two of Geoffrey Kibbe's books. Geoffrey Kibbe is one of the UK's leading mycologists. We did an interview with him on the YouTube channel just recently, so if you haven't watched that, then please do. And his series of books, which will set you back a lot more than our mushroom book, are great books to immerse yourself in when you've gone a little bit past the beginner foraging level. The point is though, surround yourself with as many books as you can find. When I started foraging, I used to dip into charity shops, and any book that I could find that had mushrooms or plants or trees or anything about coastal foraging in it, I would buy them, because you get different information in almost every book that you buy. And you simply, when you want to study foraging, you cannot have enough books. Another few tips for beginner foragers. First of all, when you find something for the first time, remember where you found it, because when you, I don't know what that was, but remember where you found it, because most things come back in the same place every single year. So another book that we've produced is our Foraging Field Journal, which is a place for you to record your finds, where you found them and when you found them, and it includes different things that you can look for at the specific times of year that you are out. This is a book that I find incredibly useful My memory's not quite as good as it used to be, so I like flicking through my own field journal to remember where I have found things and at what time of year, so I know where to go looking and what to look for. Now, there are rules to foraging for all you beginners. I recently did a video on the foraging rules that we use in the UK, so I'm going to drop a link to that in the description of this video below. And if you're going to watch this series, I'd really appreciate it if you watched that video, because we want you all to forage safely, sustainably, respectfully, and within the law. To forage safely, there's one rule to follow though, and I'm going to put it into this video right now. Never eat anything unless you are 100% sure what it is. And surprisingly to some of you, I'm sure, that applies most importantly to the green stuff, to the plants and the trees, because there are more deadly poisonous plants and trees in the UK than there are deadly poisonous mushrooms. For some reason in the UK we have what's considered a mycophobic culture, whereas in Europe, where they get all the same sorts of mushrooms really that we get in the UK, they teach their children about foraging for mushrooms just like we teach our children about foraging for blackberries. The point is though, never eat anything unless you know exactly what it is and that it's edible. That applies to fruits, that applies to roots, that applies to mushrooms, and it applies to the leaves that you see when you're out and about. The second thing is, why go foraging? Foraging is really, really good for you. Foraging is good for your mind. You're learning about all of these things and you're connecting with nature. Foraging is good for your body. You're walking, you're getting out and about in the sunshine, you're exposing yourself to sunshine and your eyes to light. And thirdly, it's good for your well-being, because just being out in nature is now known to be good for you, for both your physical and your mental health. And with regards to that, I'd like you to watch another video, which I'll put into the links below here. It was done by one of our instructors, Rob, who's a doctor, and he talks about all of the different physical and mental health benefits of foraging. It's a great thing to do, and it's free. So it's something you can do with the whole family without spending a fortune. So I think it's something that everyone in the UK should know a little bit more about. And that's what the point of this series is going to be, to teach you guys how to go foraging safely and how to enjoy nature's amazing larder respectfully along the way. So with regards to learning about foraging, books and our YouTube channel, this series, and our website, which has guides on both mushrooms and plants and trees, they're all well and good, people, but there is nothing, even this series, which obviously I'm expecting you all to get quite a lot out of, there is nothing that gives you as much confidence in going to pick things for yourselves as being hands-on, as getting out into nature and picking your own plants with somebody who can tell you what they are, where they grow, what they look like, what they smell like, how they feel and how they taste. The hands-on experience is basically the best way to learn. So get out there with people that you know that know a bit about this. That's what to do. That is the best way to learn about foraging. If you know a botanist or a mycologist, then you're a lucky person. Badger them to take you out and teach you about the plants and the mushrooms, or go on a foraging course, because going on a foraging course is one of the best ways to get you started and to get you confident, and basically in a short space of time learn how to make all of your walks a little bit more interesting and give you that understanding and connection with nature that you can't get from reading books or even watching this video. So with regards to that, obviously we run foraging courses, and we run foraging courses all over the UK. We've been doing it longer than most, and all our instructors are very well trained. They're all food hygienists, they're all first aiders, some of them are doctors, some of them are chefs. They are basically great people to learn from. So if you really want to get into foraging, I would highly recommend booking a course. And because of that, and just so that I can gauge how successful this video is, we're going to do a little promotion with this series, which is that if you book using the voucher code YouTube1 for any of our foraging courses, that's YouTube1, we will provide you one of these foraging field journals for free, so that you can remember what you've found and where to go back to in the years afterwards. I'm not going to do this preamble at the beginning of the rest of the series. This is episode 1, and I've taken this opportunity to give you a little bit of a heads up of a starting point and what you should do if you want to get into this. Now I'm going to talk about the plants that you can find in your garden, because when you're connecting with nature, the first place to start is where you're outside most often. And it's April the 23rd, I think, today. It's been a horrible start to the year. It's been wet and miserable. So I haven't done much weeding in my garden yet, and I'm sure quite a lot of you guys are the same. That means that when this video comes out, quite a lot of you are going to be out in your gardens, and that's the place to start familiarising yourself with the plants that you see every day. Once you familiarise yourself with the plants that you see in your garden, you'll start to spot them everywhere you go for a walk. Let's get on to that now. So Attila, follow me over here. We are in my garden near my my magnificent Wendy house that I built for my 4-year-old daughter Bonnie. We've had plenty of fun out here, but it's got a bit overgrown this year because I haven't been out to clear anything. And growing right beside Bonnie's Wendy house is the first and most important lesson I can teach you about foraging, and that is that there are plenty of extremely poisonous common plants. Now, growing right beside my daughter's Wendy house, we've got this plant here. I'll pick it and I'll show you. It's an impressive plant. Grows to sometimes even about 10 feet tall, and it's the first member of the carrot family that I'm going to teach you about in this series. We will revisit the carrot family in quite a few of the episodes of this series, because it's an extremely common family of plants, and it's a really interesting one for foragers. It contains some amazing edibles, things like carrots and parsnips and sweet cicely and hogweed, which will come up quite a few times. But it also contains the most poisonous plants in the country. There's one of them, hemlock water dropwort, which you'll see in the Riversides episode, which is reputedly the most poisonous plant in the whole northern hemisphere of the planet. Now this one here is very famous. Some of you might know what it is. This is hemlock, a member of the carrot family. Now it's growing in my garden. I see it all over the country. It's an extremely common plant, and it doesn't worry me that I see it growing in my garden at all. It worries me slightly that it's so close to my daughter's Wendy house, so I am going to weed it out from here, because otherwise it would grow very tall and take over this little area, and some of my daughter's friends might not have grown up with a forager as a dad, so they won't have been warned not to just nibble any plant they see. But believe me, when you know what this plant looks like, you'll see it around children's play parks all over the country. We live beside poisonous plants. That's just a fact. You don't need to clear them unless you think there is a clear and present danger of somebody picking those plants and eating them. Just touching this plant is no danger to me whatsoever, no matter what you might read in the comments on my hemlock video from some alarmist people who thought that I shouldn't have been touching it. Believe me, touching this plant is not in any way dangerous. There are plants that are dangerous in the UK to touch, but not hemlock. Now, my thoughts are that in the carrot family, there are two sides. One side that is not for beginners. So I'm going to use this to illustrate that right now. And the other side of the carrot family, which I'll show you in just a minute, that are okay for beginners. The side that's not okay for beginners are the ones that are feathery or split, like these leaves here. All the carrot family will start growing as a rosette of these triangular shaped leaf systems. And this one has leaves that are split normally 5 times. So let's count. It's split once that way, twice that way, 3 times that way, 4 times that way, and yes, 5 times that way. And what I say to beginner foragers is just to stay away from any plant that looks like this. Unless you really know what you're doing, you are putting yourself at risk if you forage for things like chervil or even sweet cicely or wild parsley, because they are so similar to fool's parsley, hemlock that you see here, and other members of the carrot family that are toxic. The other side of the carrot family don't have this feathery leaf system. So lesson number 1 in our Foraging for Beginners series is be very aware and very careful of the carrot family here, the Apiaceae. I'll show you their flowering system in some of the other videos, or maybe later on in this one. It's easy to identify the carrot family when they're in flower. They have umbrella or upside down umbrella shaped flowers. They used to be called the umbellifers. I wish they'd kept that name because Apiaceae is a lot harder to spell and a little bit more difficult to say. I don't know why they changed it from umbellifer, but they did. That's botanists for you. But hemlock, I'll give you the key ID features of it now, because if you do want to forage from the carrot family, once you've learned a little bit more, just be aware hemlock has a hairless stem. That stem is round, not celery shaped or grooved. It has purple blotches on the stem most of the time, but it can grow without, particularly when young, it can grow without those purple blotches. And then lastly, you use your sense of smell a lot when you're out foraging, and hemlock has quite a horrible smell, but be aware, we've all got different senses of smell. We've all got different taste buds. I'll come back to this later on in the series as well. We've all got different eyesight. I'm colorblind. I'm red and green colorblind, so it makes it a bit difficult for me to discern certain things. Know yourself. If you've got a rubbish sense of smell, or you're anosmic, like one of my ex-girlfriends, it was quite handy. She couldn't smell a thing, which was great for me and my stinky forager's feet, but it was rubbish for her rubbish for her when she was trying to identify things by smell. So know yourself. If you've got a rubbish sense of smell, then you have to go by other identifying features. But smell, hemlock, it doesn't smell particularly pleasant. People say it smells a bit like the base of a hamster's cage, or mousy. So it's not an appealing smelling plant. Anyway, lesson 1, not everything that you find is edible. Do not take risks. There are deadly poisonous plants everywhere. Now that I've hopefully put a little bit of sensible fear into you, we'll get on to some edible stuff. So let's go somewhere else in the garden. Okay, so we're going to go through some really common garden weeds right now. First of all, some toxic stuff. In front of me, we have our buttercups. Two types of buttercup here. There's lots of types of buttercup. This is creeping buttercup. I'm not sure exactly what one this is. The whole of the buttercup family is poisonous. You will not prove that you like butter by eating a buttercup. Never do it. Over here, we've got a plant that you all recognise. These are our daisies. And this is our daisy leaf. Might surprise you to know, daisies are actually edible, and some people actually like them. I'm quite a fussy forager. I know that in Britain we have so many lovely tasting green plants that I tend to leave quite a lot of the edibles behind, but we've all got different taste buds. Taste a daisy leaf. You might actually like it. They're not for me though. Me and my daughter make daisy chains instead. And then over here, staying very, very basic, we've got our dandelion. Now, dandelions are very useful to the forager. You can all ID a dandelion, I'm sure. They have these spiky leaves that you see here. What you might not know is why they're called dandelions. It's dandelion, the teeth of the lion. So if you've got a dandelion leaf, it should have spikes, not lobes. That rules out the poisonous potential lookalikes, things like ragwort and stuff like that. Now, dandelions are a bitter leaf, and I say I'm a bit of a fussy forager. I don't like eating dandelions on their own raw, but we've got 5 different flavours that we pick up with our taste buds. We've got sweet and salty and sour and bitter and umami. And if you've got bitter flavours in something that you're eating, then all you need to do is compensate for that with some of those other flavours. And if you think you don't like bitter, then I think you're probably wrong, because if you like chocolate, then you like bitter flavours. Chocolate is naturally bitter, but we compensate for that bitterness with the fats and the sweet side that we put in through sugar, and the fats that we put in through milk. So you do like bitter flavours. If you like coffee, you like bitter flavours. Again, you're just compensating for the bitterness with the milk and the sugar that you put into your coffee. So dandelion leaves, they're perfect to put into your salads because they have a lovely texture. They're nice and succulent. One of the other things that I'm fussy about as a forager is textures. There's plenty of edible leaves. Our rose leaves that you see behind me here, they're even edible, but they're not a nice texture. They don't have a succulentness to them, and they're not particularly nice tasting either. Dandelion leaves though are worth putting into your salads because they are a nutritional powerhouse. There's more vitamin A, for example, in this leaf than any leaf that you're likely to buy or grow. There's loads of calcium, there's loads of vitamin C. The nutritional profile of dandelions is really probably second only to the nutritional profile of nettles. I'm not going to talk about nettles right now. I'll save that for a little bit later. The dandelion leaves are what I make the most use of, but you can use the flowers to do 2 other lovely things that my instructors do. I tend to just take it off of them. So Eric, who I set Wild Food UK up with, he makes dandelion mead, which is absolutely lovely. And Phil, who runs our courses in the North Midlands, he's very, very good at making dandelion honey, which is really, really tasty as well. So the dandelion, an innocuous garden weed, is a lovely plant to go foraging for. The roots are something that you can use as well. People roast the roots to make coffee. And also, if you like that drink, dandelion and burdock, or if you're watching this from America, things like root beer, they're made from the roots of our dandelion. And I don't think any of you would have any trouble identifying this plant. There's a few other plants around here though. It's a very weedy garden I'm in at the moment. We've got some lords and ladies, the arum lily, there's one of the leaves. Here's a more mature leaf. These leaves aren't technically toxic, but they contain what are called calcium oxalate crystals. This is a plant that will come up in one or two more of the videos as well, because it grows in amongst other lovely edibles, and it looks quite like a common plant that we go foraging for called common sorrel. Note that the lobed tails of the leaf here are rounded, not pointed. If you had pointed tails on this leaf, then you may well have common sorrel. It's something I'll definitely show you in this series at some point. But if you've got a plant with rounded tails, then it's most likely to be arum. And if you were to nibble a bit of this, you'd find that your mouth would become inflamed very, very quickly. I've heard it described by people who have eaten it as eating paper cuts. It's also a plant that I know certain people who've mistaken these leaves for good woodland toilet paper. That is a particularly painful mistake, and one that I think people only make once. So there's a few garden weeds to start off with. One though here is one of my favourite salad leaves from a flavour point of view. Beside Attila, there's a true thistle. I'm half Scottish, so I love seeing thistles around my garden, but they are invasive in the lawn. Now this has true spikes on it. Pointy spikes that are painful to the touch. Over here, we've got an extremely common garden weed, which looks a bit like a thistle, but unlike a thistle, all these spikes are fakes. They're soft. So what this is a member of the sow thistle, or Sonchus genus. And these are all edible and nice tasting. So the sow thistle, along with the dandelions, go into my salads. I don't tend to eat the daisies though, just because I don't like the flavour. It's a unique flavour, but I recommend trying one for yourself. You might like them. Let's move on. Right, and now for a real favourite of mine that is growing in all of your gardens, no matter how big or small. Come on down here, Emma. This is where I grow my runner beans in a nice tower. And you're all hopefully about to start weeding your vegetable patches and your flower beds, and I guarantee you in any plant pots you've left to go a bit feral over winter, you will find this plant here. An extremely common garden plant. Grows in a rosette to start off with, like this tiny little one here. Don't know how close you can get without it going fuzzy on the camera. And that rosette will grow up into this small delicate plant here. This is hairy bittercress, the first of the cardamines that I'm going to introduce you to in this series. The cardamines are a fantastic family of plants for foragers. They all have basal leaves like this one here, where you've got lots of opposing leaves going up a stem, a petiole to a spade-shaped larger terminal leaf. This one here, the petiole is the leaf stem. Now this is a plant in the wider sort of cress group, and these leaves here taste like a cross between cress and rocket. If you like rocket and you like cress, you will love these leaves. They are so tasty, and this grows everywhere in the country almost all year round. It's a plant with a 12-week life cycle. In that 12 weeks it will grow these flowers, which will turn into these little seed pods here. I'm not sure the camera is going to be able to pick those up. Then those seed pods will just almost explode the seeds into the area, and one plant can turn into 50 in a sort of 12-week period. So it's a particularly vigorous vanguard species of plant. It gets into any type of land that's a little bit open and clear before other plants do. And I absolutely love putting this into my salad. So when I've got dandelions in the salad, I want other flavours in there to compensate for the bitterness of the dandelions. And the bittercresses, this one, hairy bittercress and wavy bittercress, are two of those lovely tasting plants that everyone should know about. This one here is absolutely lovely. And what you can do when you're weeding your flower beds and your vegetable patches at this time of year is collect up the plants, put them in a bowl full of water on your windowsill and pick out the flowering stems. And what you'll find is that they keep growing leaves for a good few weeks. And then you've got lots of lovely tasting cress just on your windowsill. So look out for this one right now whilst you're weeding your flower beds and your vegetable patches. Right, so another plant that most of you will unfortunately have in your gardens is down here. I say unfortunately because it's one of the few plants that I wouldn't introduce to my garden, even as a forager who loves weeds. In amongst my absolutely lovely tulips here, we've got this plant in 2 stages of growth. I can't really see it in flower anywhere around. This is one that any gardeners amongst you will know and hate. It's called ground elder, and I have a lot of clearing of ground elder to do in my garden at the moment. This is the young shoot of ground elder, and this is the slightly more mature leaf. When it grows up, it will get to about this height and it will flower with a sort of off-white umbel flower. So it's another member of the wider carrot family. If you're a gardener, you'll hate it, but what you might not know is that this plant was actually brought to the country as an edible plant. It was brought over by the Romans as a parsley flavoured pot herb. And if you crush up the leaves, you'll get a parsley-esque smell. Now, these young, bright green shoots I find absolutely lovely in salads. They've got a succulent texture and a parsley-esque flavour. So you do want to not put too many into your salad, but they certainly bulk up a decent salad for me. Put a nice sweet dressing with them and you're on to a winner. These more mature leaves have got a papery texture, and as I've already said, I'm a bit fussy about textures, so I don't put these into my salad. They also develop a little bit of bitterness when they get older, but these leaves are perfect if you remove them from the stem, if you use them like spinach. So when I say use them like spinach, that means put them in a frying pan of boiling water for about 5 minutes, chuck the water out, and put in a nice bit of butter and salt and pepper, and you've got a lovely green for the side of your plate. You can use them as a spinach substitute in other dishes as well. So spanakopita is something that I've made with these before. It's lovely. They're a leaf that you will find in abundance, unfortunately, all over the wild and all over your garden. Now, getting rid of them is very difficult. Whenever you cut them back, you strengthen the root mat underneath, and they just come back again in a couple of days. They're what we call a cut and come again plant. So if you've got it in your garden, cut it back, and if you keep vigorously cutting it back, then you can weaken the plant so much that it might actually die. But it's a difficult plant to get rid of, believe me. You just need to leave one tiny little bit of root in the ground and it will come back. Now, like lots of other plants, this is a plant that sort of changes its makeup a little bit after it's flowered. So nettles, after they've flowered, become a bit of a laxative and a bit of a diuretic. I have heard that these, after they've flowered, become a little bit of a laxative, a little bit of a diuretic, and a mild soporific. So I suppose technically that means that if you eat too many ground elder leaves after they've flowered, then it might send you to sleep and you might wake up in a bit of a mess. That's why we only eat them when they're young. Anyway, Igipodium podagraria, I think is the scientific name today. A garden weed for sure. These, oh, there's a nice one. These nice, bright, succulent leaves that you see here go into my salads. And these more mature, matte green coloured leaves are ones that I cook and use as a green. So hopefully that means that when you're weeding this over the next month or two or year or three, you might not hate it quite so much. Let's see what other weeds I've got in the garden. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about nettles and dead nettles. Come on down here, Attila, let's have a close look. We have here our white dead nettle, and here we've got our true stinging nettle.
Don't pick that, it stings.
Well, I don't mind getting stung quite so much because the stings are actually not so painful as long as you don't get stung on this sort of area where your skin is much thinner and more sensitive. My fingertips are okay at dealing with the stings. I don't want to get stung on the back of my knees though, Attila, that would be quite painful. This one in my right hand though wouldn't sting me at all. Any nettle looking plant with true flowers like this one here is not a nettle, it's a dead nettle. It's part of the wider mint family. And as you can see, the mint family has a square stem. Let me pick that bit off. Little tip for you. Things in the UK with a square stem are normally in the wider mint family. The only toxic mints are the hemp nettles, ones that grow quite tall. These white flowers here are perfectly edible, and on a nice sunny day, they well up quite a lot of nectar and they're quite sweet, so they're good for garnishing salads. The leaves aren't very tasty, they're not something that I use very often, and to be honest, I don't really pick my dead nettles. This is the white dead nettle, Lamium album. You get yellow dead nettle, that's yellow archangel. You get red dead nettle, hembit dead nettle, with all different colour flowers. The reason I don't tend to pick this one is that the other name for this is the bee nettle, and it gets that name because these flowers are specifically designed for the proboscis of a bumblebee. Bumblebees absolutely love these flowers, and I love bees, so I tend to leave the dead nettles behind. What I'm here to talk about though are our true nettles. Pick another one here. And these are a plant that most of you will have in your garden. It's the first plant that most people learn about. You don't need to be told how to identify a stinging nettle. But what might surprise you is that this is one of the most nutritional plants in the whole of the UK. I've just nipped off the tip there. I'm going to roll it around in my fingers. By doing so, with the tough skin on my fingertips, I'll get rid of all the stings. And then I'll happily eat this nettle because it's quite a tasty plant. Other plants develop bitter flavours like tannins to defend themselves against being eaten by mammals like us. This plant, the nettle, Urtica dioica, defends itself in a wholly more aggressive way by stinging you, so it doesn't have to develop those horrible tannins. Now, this is a plant that is, as I said, a nutritional powerhouse. It contains vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin C. There's no vitamin D, but you get that on the sunny days when you're picking it. There's vitamin K, there's more iron than spinach, there's calcium, there's a whole load of other different ores and minerals that you need to balance out a healthy diet. Most amazingly to me, these leaves, dry weight, are about 25% protein. That much protein to me is unheard of in any other leaf. So what do I use nettles for? First of all, when I'm picking nettles, I only pick the top parts, top 5 or 6 leaves. And then what I'll use these in is any one pot cooking, any soup, any stew, any stir fry, anything that you're making a nice sauce out of. I won't use very much of the stems because the stems can become very fibrous, and they're actually very useful for making cordage out of, for making string out of. But these stinging nettles, they go into most of my one pot cooking because as soon as you heat them up past about 80 degrees, the stings are destroyed. And what you do by putting them into your cooking is add all of that nutrition. Now, obviously, by cooking certain things like vitamin C, you're going to reduce or change the vitamin C in what you're cooking. So you'll get less of it by cooking. And if you want the full nutritional profile, you should do what I did and eat them raw. But still, to bulk up your cooking with a nice, free, tasty leaf, there is nothing that I think is better than our humble stinging nettle. Now, when you're picking stinging nettles, I'm sure you will get a little bit stung unless you wear gloves. If you do get stung though, the plant to go for is not the dock leaf. It's this plant down here. What you can see there is a very common edible garden weed called ribwort plantain. I think there's 7 different types of plantain in the UK. 2 of them are coastal, our stag's horn plantain, which is quite tasty, and sea plantain, which looks a bit like grass, to be honest. But all the inland species have this very distinctive vein pattern. Some of them are round-leafed, our greater or common plantain, and hoary plantain is a bit wider than this, but they all have veins that run from the base of the leaf to the tip of the leaf, which makes them quite easy to identify. And they all have flower stems that look a bit like this. Greater plantain will have a much longer flowering part of the plant, but still incredibly similar. Now, this isn't a plant that I use in my salads, although our instructor down in Brighton, David, he quite likes this plant, so he puts it in his salads. For me, this is purely a medicinal plant. I don't hang my hat on everything I read from herbal medicine books. I prefer things to be proved by science. This is a plant that has proven medicinal benefits, so I'm happy to talk about those. But a bit of history about this plant. It's known all over the world as Englishman's foot or white man's foot, because almost everywhere that we colonized, we took this plant with us, probably as a medicinal plant. It was a staple of all old apothecaries. Every druid healer would know about this plant and the things that it could do for you. So I do know it's an antiseptic, which means that it's good for cleaning up cuts. I've heard that it's a mild antibiotic as well, but if you need antibiotics, people, please go to the doctors. I do know that it's a good antihistamine though, so that's what I use it for most often. And then On top of that, the sap of the plant is an emollient. What that means is that the sap will soak into your skin and it will take those antihistamine and antiseptic properties with it, which means that it is a plant that has a proven effect on stinging nettle stings. If you get the sap out of it and rub it where you've been stung, then you probably won't get those little bumps that you get from most stinging nettle stings. I'll show you how to get that sap out now. I've got a bunch of the leaves. What you do is crush them up, put them in your hand, start rolling them around. And then after a little while, they'll ball up and you'll start to feel the texture change. When you do feel that texture change, you add a bit of extra pressure. And then pretty soon, you hear a squelch. And there we go. Look at the amount of sap I've got out of those leaves there. Also acts like a very weird fake tan if you don't wash it off. But that sap is what you would use on your stinging nettle stings, or any insect bite, or any allergic rash. You know, it's not going to work on a viral rash, it won't cure meningitis, but any allergic skin reaction, that sap is going to be good for. Now, I don't use the leaves as a forager, but what I do use are these flower heads. These flower heads have a mild taste of mushrooms. You might remember them if you were one of the naughty kids at school. You can make pop guns out of them. That was a bit of a misfire. Try again. One last go.
Don't shoot the camera, please.
And those flower heads, like I said, they have a mild taste of mushrooms. So if I don't have any mushrooms around and I want to flavour up a nice bit of creamy pasta sauce, I will happily use these flower heads to do so. That one was actually particularly mushroomy today. It depends on how fresh they are. So try them in different stages, and certainly before you put them in your sauces. But ribwort plantain, extremely common. You'll find it in your garden and you'll find it everywhere you go walking. And this is what to use when you've been stung by a stinging nettle. Okay, 2 more garden weeds for you in this episode, and I'm standing in a patch of very common garden weeds and a very common hedgerow plant that I absolutely love. Just down here we have another member of our carrot family. This is hogweed. You can see again that triangular leaf system, but unlike the hemlock I showed you at the beginning, this has one leaf on either side of the plant with a terminal leaf that's a bit like a maple leaf. It's an incredibly variable plant though. They don't all look like this. In fact, over here we've got one that is much more spiky. Now, common hogweed, Heracleum spondylium, is one of my favourite plants to forage for. Over here we have the first bit that I go for. These are the shoots of common hogweed, and I treat these just like asparagus. I'm not saying that they taste like asparagus. The stems have a bit of a celery-esque flavour, but with other different tones on top, and the leaves have a unique flavour that I can't really compare to anything else. It's a plant that I treat like asparagus in that I'll put it in a pot of boiling water to soften up these stems and soften up these hairs that you see on the plant. You can see on the stem there. And then I'll chuck the water out, chuck in a nice knob of butter and a bit of salt and pepper, and this is a fantastic green for the side of your plate. In spring we get loads of these lovely shoots, and I've got loads of them growing around here. I can easily do a little side dish for any dinner out of this small patch of common hogweed. This is a plant though that has a bit of a warning for you. The sap of many of the Apiaceae, many of the carrot family, has what's called phytophototoxicity, or plant light toxicity. And what that means is that if you get the sap on your skin on a sunny day, your skin can burn. Now, even though I'm half Scottish, my skin is not particularly sensitive, so I'll happily pick this plant without gloves on. But if you do have sensitive skin, then please use gloves to pick this plant. And just be aware, some people do have an allergic reaction to this plant as well. So the first time you pick it, just be aware of that. Most people though are fine picking and eating hogweed. And I use it in so many different things. It goes in my stir fries. It's not a plant that you eat raw. It never goes in my salads, but it goes in a soup that we make, our hogweed and wild garlic soup. The recipe for it's on our website. It's a fantastic tasting soup. It goes into my stews. And then once it matures, I'll show you it mature in some of the other videos in this series. It gives us two other fantastic crops. Those crops are the florets, the unopened flower buds of the plant, and they are just as good as cauliflower for making a sort of cauliflower cheese or a hogweed floret cheese. And then the third crop we get from this plant are the seeds. The seeds, when green, have a slightly coriander-like flavour. They're a herby flavour to add to your dishes. And then when dried, they taste extremely similar to cardamom. So I use those dried seeds instead of cardamom in my curries. In fact, I don't use cardamom anymore. I haven't used cardamom for years. I've got a jar of dried hogweed seeds instead. This is a plant that does have a dangerous lookalike, so I'm going to drop in some photos of that now. What you can see there is giant hogweed. Giant hogweed is an invasive species. It was brought over by the Victorians, and it's not a poisonous plant, but it has much stronger phototoxicity. The phototoxicity of our common hogweed is akin to that of a parsnip. So don't put parsnip sap on your skin in the sun, because you'll burn just like you would with hogweed sap. But giant hogweed has phototoxicity of a much higher level. And it means that if you even touch giant hogweed, you can end up in hospital with burns quite severe and blistering, like golf ball sized blisters coming out of wherever the sap has touched you. So I consider giant hogweed the most dangerous plant in the country, more dangerous than hemlock, because it's a plant that can put you in hospital just by touching it. Don't let that put you off though. There's ways to tell the difference. Obviously, when giant hogweed is huge, like the photo you can see there, you wouldn't mistake it for common hogweed, because common hogweed only gets to about my height, about this height here. When young though, giant hogweed can look quite similar. It does have some key differences though. First of all, the leaves are normally much more spiky and serrated, and secondly, the leaves of common hogweed have these downy white hairs, which hopefully you can pick up on the camera there as I move it around. Giant hogweed has much shinier leaves that are almost hairless. If you do see giant hogweed, you should report it to your environment agency or your local council, because it's a dangerous plant that should be removed from anywhere, particularly that children might frequent. It's a plant that is mainly restricted to riversides, but it does grow in other moist areas. I've seen it on motorway embankments, and I've seen it in certain woodland as well, and certain pathways and hedgerows, but mainly it's a riverside plant. Don't let that put you off common hogweed though. When you get familiar with common hogweed, you'll see it absolutely everywhere, and it's a wonderful edible for those of you who don't have an allergy to it. Lastly, to finish up with our garden weeds, there's one down here which again all of you will have in your garden. what you can see there is a plant that looks a bit like a strawberry, but unlike a strawberry, it has these opposing leaves running down the stem, or these opposing leaflets. This is a plant called the wood aven, which is a plant that all of you have in your garden, full stop. Now, it's a totally edible plant. Everything above ground is edible, but again, it's sort of post-apocalyptic food to me. It's not something that I consider very tasty. But the roots of this plant, I shall just pull this one up and show you. The roots of this plant completely replace a spice in my kitchen. Now, that spice is one that you possibly don't use very often. I say I'll pull the roots up. Nearly got it. It's a very shallow rooted plant with these spindly little roots, and those roots I'm already getting a very spicy aroma from. Those roots are a like for like replacement for cloves. They contain a chemical called eugenol, which, just in case you didn't know, is the primary ingredient in all dental analgesics. So if you've got toothache, you can use clove oil or wood aven roots to get rid of the pain of toothache. They won't cure the problem, but they'll certainly take away the pain temporarily. But from a culinary point of view, these roots, for me, are better than cloves for a couple of reasons. First of all, they disappear into the cooking that you're doing. The only thing you can't do is, you know, stud a gammon with these roots, but anything else you might use cloves in, you can use these roots for. And unlike cloves, you don't have to pull them out at the end of cooking, because if someone bites a clove, they can easily break a tooth. So that's why you would do that. But these roots are nice and soft, so they disappear into the cooking that you've made. Secondly, they're milder. They've got less eugenol in them, so they don't overpower things quite so easily. If you cook with cloves a lot, then you'll know that cloves are a powerful spice that can really ruin certain dishes that you're making. Thirdly, and probably most importantly for me, these roots are in your garden right now, whereas cloves are grown in places like Madagascar and Tanzania, and I think the closest place I've heard of is maybe the United Arab Emirates. So every clove in your kitchen, every clove that you have ever bought has done that many food miles, whereas these roots taste exactly the same and they're growing in your garden. So never buy cloves again, just pick your wood aven roots. I put them in my mulled wine at Christmas because they're always around at Christmas. What I do is I just pick the plant, wash the roots off, and then pop the whole thing into the pot while it's mulling. It looks all twee and foragey, and then all you do is you take them out when your mulled wine has got that lovely clovey spice flavour to it. Another thing I love to do with these roots is make poached pears. So when you're poaching pears, you'll poach them in some red wine with some sugar, and a few of these wood aven roots, that whole system there would probably be enough to poach a couple of pears, and they taste absolutely fantastic. So yeah, like I said, never buy cloves if you're in the UK. Just pick your wood aven roots and use them. They taste exactly the same. That has been our first episode of Foraging for Beginners. Those are, I think we went through maybe 12 or 13 plants there. So I think that's enough for the first episode. The next episode will be coming out soon. Until then, get out and about. Have a look for the plants that I've shown you, and let me know what you found in the comments below. We'll be back again soon. That's it for today.